genetics. So maybe we'll be learning that also.
Right, absolutely. You're right, Lopamudra. What we will be learning is development of the human from conception. That is, from the time the male and female parents are going to conceive the child, from that time, what is occurring within the mother's womb till the decline or death of the individual. What are the different stages in which the person goes through? And we are also going to understand the different aspects of these changes. So, for example, if you talk about physical changes that will occur from infancy up until adolescence, adulthood. So we are going to study that whole sequence of change that is going to occur. So can some of you mention what is the purpose of studying developmental psychology? Some of the benefits that you will receive as a result of understanding this knowledge of human development.
Ma'am, so it will be helpful for us to understand the developmental milestones.
All right, developmental milestones, very good. Have a seat, just one moment. Have a seat, within a minute I'll just connect it to the projector. Okay, so you're right. We are going to study the different developmental milestones. How will it be applicable to you personally? What do you feel? Will it be applicable?
Ma'am, if we can understand the development, only then we'll be able to understand what causes a hindrance to that development.
Absolutely. Go on.
Ma'am, so if there is a hindrance in any of the stages of development, we can understand that and give interventions accordingly.
Okay, really good, really good. Just a minute. Very good answer. I'm just requesting you to give me a minute. I'll connect the laptop to the projector. There are a few students here. All right, sorry for the delay. So, very good answer that was. One is that understanding human development is going to help us to understand the problems that arise in development. And after, we are going to be able to help individuals who are having those problems. Very good. So without further ado, let's begin the presentation. Just today we are going to understand just a brief overview, and this is an introductory class to lifespan development. Just a second, students. Okay. Try to minimize the talking, okay, please. Be distracting. All right, are you able to see the screen? Yes. Okay, so we all know that what these images indicate. As Lopamudra already mentioned, there were things about genes and genetics and the evolution of that. So we are going to understand human development in all its perspectives, all right? From evolutionary perspective, from pre-human beginnings, very briefly, we are going to touch on that. And we are also going to understand from conception till the end of the life, how the individual will develop from a single-celled organism to a multicellular organism, as you see and know yourself to be today. We are also going to look at the gender differences in development. And in most cases, we are going to be focusing on the typical progression of development, how most people are going to progress in life. Of course, there will be differences from individual to individual, but typically the differences are very little, minute, if you see on a broader scale. So first we'll start with the definition of development, right? Very important definition. It is the pattern of change, right? How that change is progressing from one stage to another, which begins at conception. Conception means at the time of fertilization, when the parents are beginning the child's journey. That's the time from conception, and it continues throughout the lifespan. So we're not only going to look at from childhood to adulthood, we're going to look from the beginning right up until death and decline. Most development students will involve growth, right? We will grow in age, we may grow in size, but at a certain point, there is a decline in development. So at a certain age, you must have seen, if you're in the 20 years that you are, on earth, you must have seen older individuals, how across time, say a 50-year-old, when once they turn 60, once they turn 65, 70, 80, they decrease in height, their physical strength, their mental abilities, cognitive strengths, language abilities, their speed, processing speed, as well as physical agility, all of this is going to decline. A common example of this is eyesight, right? When we are younger, we may not have as many problems associated with vision. But the moment you hit middle adulthood, we see that individuals may require glasses when they never had problems with their eyes in the beginning. So this is an example of how development is not only growth, although predominantly for most part of the life we are growing, but then there is a decline, which will then result into death and dying. Unfortunately, we are mortals, right? So there is going to be an end point to this life, at least the end point till where we know. We don't know what is after death, right? Of course, we will turn into other forms of life, like into different forms of matter, but life as we know it will end at one point. Now, that is development. Lifespan, another really important definition. Okay, lifespan, as the word says, it's spanning the entire life of the individual. Now, this perspective of development says that development itself is lifelong. Remember, development includes growth and decline. So you have this lifelong growth and decline. Number one, first feature. Second feature of lifespan is that it is multi-dimensional. Means there are multiple factors, multiple sides from which you can view the development in the lifespan. So, for example, we can see the changes in growth and decline in biological aspects. Say how we spoke of eyes, vision, the visual acuity, for example, how much we can focus on objects which are close by, further away, and so on. So that would be one dimension, biological. Other examples of biological will include things like your heart health, your circulatory health, digestive health, muscular health, right? All of this will grow, and at a certain point it will decline. Other dimensions include social dimensions of the person, how at one, maybe in childhood, they are very friendly or they are not very friendly, and that will change across time. Then we can look at the development in terms of mental abilities, cognitive abilities. We can look at development in the aspect of physical abilities. Finally, the activity or action that the person does. Biological will be more inward, physical will be outward actions and abilities of the person. Now, lifespan development also refers to, or not refers to, also includes a component of multi-directionality. So as we have seen how there is growth and decline, in many directions, the development can take place. For example, a good keyword for remembering multidimensional would be that development has losses and gains. So when you are very young, it is really easy for you to learn a language, right? Some new words, a language, say, you can even, I'm sure most of you might be bilingual, trilingual, quadlingual, you can speak 3, 4, 5 languages. And so that ability is strong in childhood, but it sort of declines as you move on to adulthood. So there is both. There is first an increase, then there's a decline, and in multiple directions this can go. So it can sometimes be moderate increase, sometimes a lot of increase, sometimes very little increase or decrease, and so on. So the path to which development occurs could be multidirectional. Now the third one here is that development is plastic. It's a very important feature. By plastic, we mean that it is modifiable. We mean that it is going to, we can change our strengths, we can change our abilities as we develop in life. So plastic, you all know, can be molded into any shape and form if put into the right form, like temperature, the conditions should be appropriate. It's the same with development in the lifespan, that it is modifiable. So some examples of modifiable traits of development are the same that we discussed earlier. Sensory abilities, hearing, for example, will become slightly less as the individual reaches late adulthood and might decrease over time. Again, this is not common for each and every single person, but on average, we see that mostly the sensory faculties, the physical abilities, all of this will meet a decline. Plastic also implies that we can change our abilities. So if we focus more, say for example, how I had mentioned earlier for multidirectionality about the acquisition of language. If you put enough effort in adulthood or adolescence, that is where you all are at the moment, you can still make use of the skills that you have and still learn languages regardless of it being a milestone of childhood. You can still improve, acquire new languages if you try. So plastic means that it is changeable and malleable as and when the individual puts the efforts. Uh, some of you may be aware of neuroplasticity. This is a very, very exciting and very, very novel approach to science at the moment. Neuroplasticity is the fact that at every given minute, our nervous system, that is brain, spinal cord, all the nerves and sensory organs, your skin, your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and other sensory abilities, as well as the nerves themselves, they change in structure and function every minute. So learning itself, okay, and if you learn something, if I learn to speak, it is because of a permanent change in the nervous system that I am able to pick up that ability. Memory too follows the same principle of following change in the nervous system to allow memories to be remembered as well as to be acquired in the first place, and then for you to remember those things that you are memorizing or learning. That too is a function of the nervous system. So neuroplasticity allows us to be able to change our abilities, to allow us to change even our thoughts. So for example, constantly if a person is having negative thoughts, okay, or unpleasant thoughts, what happens? We will find them having some form of maladaptive disturbance, like they may suffer from anxiety, they may suffer from depression, when in fact it is only the repetition of particular thought processes, repetition of particular habits that have made that habit now automatic for the person, that it then becomes, without them doing, they feel depressed, without them being in the conditions which originally caused the depression, even in the absence of that, because the body has adapted due to the plasticity, the person is going to feel the depressive symptoms in the absence of the depressive environment or this depressive stimuli. Next is that lifespan development is multidisciplinary. So even although we are learning psychology, we are going to be employing principles of genetics, we are going to be employing principles of biology, chemistry, molecular physics, a lot of this, sociology, a lot of different disciplines are explaining development in the lifespan. All right, so multidisciplinary and contextual. Context means what? Now, currently, if how many participants are there? If there are 50 participants, there are going to be 50 different contexts for the person. All right, there are going to be 50 different contexts, and here we four, even though we are in the same room, we too are going to have different contexts. Okay, 1 second. Pin. Let's pin this ourselves. Okay. Seems like okay. All right. So context means what is around the individual, what is not just physically around, but the time and period in which the individual is in. So the environment as well as the period in time or history is going to determine the lifespan of lifespan development. Sorry. So second aspect of this definition, it involves growth. We've discussed growth. We know what growth is, from small to big, from one element to multiple elements. So you can think of a seed which turns into a tree. Maintenance, that is, the tree is going to require water, sunlight, nutrients in the soil to be able to develop across its lifespan. And regulation, same. If you put too much water, what will happen? Will the tree grow properly? If it is under less nutrients, it won't grow properly. So it needs to be regulated. Regulation means modulation. That is, not too much, not too less, and a balance of things. And overall, the entire lifespan is constructed through biological, socio-cultural, and individual factors that all work together to finally determine the entire lifespan and the development in the lifespan. So this slide is really important, students, because it's going to give you a snapshot of your entire course. And this is going to be applied to the different topics that you will be learning, but it will be very, very important for you to know this and understand this slide very clearly. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask, all right? Now, we are going to look at the specific principles of lifespan. Now, he's no more. There was a German scientist named Baltes, right? Paul B. Baltes. His pronunciation may differ from country to country. This individual is one of the most prominent developmental psychologists of the world. And although he does not have a formal title of the father of developmental psychology, he's sort of considered as the most influential in the field. A lot of the principles we have already seen in the previous definition. So let us review what are these principles. There are around 7. Firstly, development across the lifespan is lifelong. Okay, simple, lifelong. So we don't stop at middle adulthood and say that, okay, the life is over. This is where, development stops. No, it is continuous from conception till death. Multidimensional, It can have multiple components: social, cultural, biological, physical, emotional, cognitive. Different dimensions will be included in the development process. Multi-directional, there are losses as well as gains. Sometimes the losses will stagnate for a while, and then there might be a peak in growth, or there might be growth and then stagnation and then a decline, or growth or just growth, or just decline, depending on which part of life the person is. Since we are not speaking of a particular stage, we can say that the direction of change is in the entire lifespan is multi-directional. Modifiable, plasticity, correct, same point, because of the ability of the nervous system to change in structure and function given with its interaction with the environment, both internal and external environment. Modifiability or plasticity of development or change in traits, change in abilities, change in physical appearance, all of this is possible throughout the lifespan, and it is one of the core features of development. Changing allocation of resources. What does this mean? Changing your allocation of resources. Resources are things that are going to help the individual in their life. So allocation means where that resource is put, in which area it is put. For example, when you are an adolescent, it is your resources will be much more focused towards self and peers. You may not be concerned as much with what adults are saying or what children are saying, as opposed to what your peer group, that is the individuals of your same age, are saying or speaking. So your social resources, your emotional resources may be directed towards self and peers. For example, okay, I want you to think about this. If you are going to a mall, okay, and you're with your friends and you're with your parents, okay, and you pick out an outfit and your parents say, wow, beautiful, really nice, looks great on you, but your friends say, no chance, not happening, this is not looking good on you. Who, and you are on the fence, you don't know which one, whether you like it or no, whether you should go for it. Whose opinion are you most likely to take? Friends, absolutely, right? And that is the key feature, that is a feature of adolescence, where the peer recognition or peer identification becomes a goal of the person. Compared to childhood and adulthood, the adolescent is more concerned with how their peers are viewing them, or how in general people are viewing them. As children, you may not bother what you are wearing, you may just want to go do what you want, you may not care what the other person may think of you, but that all changes once puberty hits in. So you all are going to understand it in detail, what are the specific changes that occur in adolescence. So back to question 1, what is the importance of studying this development? A lot of parents will come to you, I don't know, my child doesn't listen, my child doesn't want to, is back answering me. Why is that? We have through understanding of developmental psychology, you will learn that certain changes in the biology, psyche, as well as the biology of the individual make him or her more prone to want independence and autonomy in opinion, in the choices that they make, as well as the things that the things that they choose and prefer. And that is the reason that they might be in that rebellious phase. A lot of parents, again, as well as adolescents themselves, will say, ma'am or sir, I'm unable to control my emotions, it's just too much, I cannot take it. And that's because of that storm and stress that is occurring within the physiology. Both nervous system as well as the rest of the body is under peak of change in adolescence. So much so that this much change has not been seen since inception. Since birth, it is not this much peak in change that comes after puberty in physiological development isn't seen till adolescence. So till childhood, even though the child is rapidly growing, it is not as much as the change that happens in the adolescent phase of life. So the resources that the person allocates, for example, you may as your current period or stage of life, and even your earlier period or stage of life, childhood, adolescence, it's easy for you to learn, so you don't have to allocate too much of your time and mental energy into understanding and learning something. Whereas as you age, that ability to learn becomes slightly decline. So you'll hear a lot of adults say, my time to study is over. I cannot study. This doesn't go in my head. I'm not young anymore. You'll hear these kinds of comments. And that's because they have to allocate much more resources because of the stage at which they are. So the allocation of resources keeps changing. Now, next point. This was not there before. We saw how socio-cultural and biological individual processes work together. Here, we are talking about the relative influence of biology and culture shifts over time. What this means? Relative means in relation to a particular time, biology at one point is going to have more influence than at another time. So in relation to one time to another, culture also is going to have different influence at a particular time than on another. In infancy, will culture play a big role? In your opinions, do you feel the traditions that the person is following, will that play a big enough role on the infant as opposed to an adult? What do you feel?
Yes, ma'am. Even.
Yes, ma'am. So in adulthood, the difference, the cultural impact is going to be much more. The influence of culture will be more because here there is societal or cultural expectation for them to do those traditions, to follow those rules. Whereas as an infant who is mainly primarily dependent on another person, an adult or somebody other than themselves for their needs, for basic needs, you won't see an infant going to church and holding their hands. And nobody is going to judge them for that. You won't see an infant taking off their shoes when they enter a temple or any religious place. And there are no such rules or influence for their behavior in that infancy. Correct? And that's because of the stage at which they are. So culture again may not be as relevant to a child or adolescent as much as it is for an adult. So in this way, the influence of these factors will vary over time. Now, also, development or lifespan is influenced by history and the cultural context. Okay, let us presume, let's take an example that all of us know. We are all Indians, I hope. I don't hope, I think, I meant to say. Because today when speaking with you all, is there any international student here? No. Just okay. So all of you all will be knowing 1947, right? So 1947 was when we had our independence. Now partition, independence. Now that period, do you think that a 20-year-old at that point in time is going to have the same developmental trajectory as a person in 2021? Of course not. It's not only the partition, but also now with time there is rapid change. We should not go far. 1947 is way too far. Look at your own parents. Look at the children that you know in your life. They will be starkly different from you. You and your parents will be very different. You and the children that you know are going to be very different. So history as well as culture to culture, there is going to play a big role in the development. For example, in somebody's culture where physical activity is highly promoted. So at a young age, they are told to do. Say for us, we have yoga. Now, how much we do, how much it is enforced, it is individual choice. So, in a culture where physical activity is strongly encouraged, you're going to have individuals who are more, perhaps more taller, more stronger, their build will be different, their stance, things will be different. For somebody who is born in a military culture or a disciplinary culture, their mannerisms, their outlook, their gait, that is how they stand, how they walk, all of that is going to be different based on where their environment, the time in or in history where they are born, and so on. All right. So the nature of development. Okay, we have biological. We have three different components that we are going to look into separately, like in each of the in the following chapters. So biological component, as you can see on the screen, is going to imply to the internal workings of the body, from organal to the cellular levels, to the genetic, in fact, because inside the cell, the smaller unit is the gene. So from the gene to the organ systems, and then finally you have the human being, the final human being. So the biological aspect of development is going to focus on all these internal mechanisms, hormones, then the different kinds of neurotransmitters, the different changes in the genes that will happen as a result, as the individual is going through the lifespan. Cognitive is the changes in the mental processing as well as the mental processes of the person. These are the internal, abilities which we generally focus in psychology: memory, learning, thinking, problem solving, reasoning, all of these changes, how they occur throughout the life. And socio-emotional, which is different from cognitive because this is biological, then cognitive is all individual. But whereas socio means outside of the individual, right? So me in relation to Shweta, Kushi, Jihad, in relation to these, all of us, how we are going to be speaking, right? How we are going to be interacting with each other, how, because of how Kushi is treating me, how I'm going to feel socio-emotional, how because of the way the teacher treats me, what is going to be my outlook, my opinion of myself, because of how my parents treat me, how my peers treat me, all of that we are going to see that as one of the how development is shaped in life. The stages, now we are going to just briefly look at them. I will not go into detail. So first stage that you are going to understand throughout this entire course is prenatal environment. That's the first one. So this is before the individual is born, right? So this is all the development that occurs in the womb for the 9 months that the baby is inside the womb of the mother. What is that environment? How is the development of the progression taking place in that environment? That is the first stage. Second is infancy. Once the baby is born, what are the developments that will occur? How reflexes will develop, how understanding of emotions are going to occur, how interaction with others is going to begin in infancy. So in all these three areas, cognitive, how the child will not know the difference between self and others as an infant. So all this in biological, cognitive, and socio-emotional. Then we have childhood after infancy, right? After childhood, we have adolescence. Please note, childhood and adolescence, they themselves have sub-stages. So we'll have early, middle, late childhood, early, middle, late adulthood, okay? Early, middle, late. But since compared to adulthood, the childhood phase is a few years. So in this broader classification, we don't go to this to say early childhood, middle childhood, late childhood. Although when you're studying childhood, you will look at the three branches under them. Now we look at separately early adulthood, middle adulthood, and late adulthood. All right. So these are seen as distinct stages because they span way more years than childhood, specific stages of childhood. They will be a fewer years as compared to the whole early adulthood phase. So You have prenatal environment, infancy, childhood, adolescence, early adulthood, middle adulthood, and late adulthood. All right. Now we are going to quickly review some of the issues, some of the questions that exist within the field of human development. By issues, we don't mean that these are problems or unanswered. It's just that we cannot yet tell which of the two that we are going to see, which of the two things like is more important than the other. For example, the first issue, this is a very prominent one. What is more important in development of the human being? Is it the heredity or is it the environment of the individual? Is it what the traits and qualities that the person inherits from their parents and the previous generations? Is that more prominent or dominant factor in development, or is it the environment? Environment is, of course, what is around the child. Heredity is inside the genes, right? It's inside the body, whereas environment is outside. Both play a significant role. Each of you will have your mother's or your father's eyes, the features. Maybe one of your parents' smile is going to be on your face. You have never met your great grandfather, but his nose may be sitting on your face right now, right? Something like from way before. So sometimes you see two short parents and suddenly one of the child is extremely tall, right? And then you'll be like, okay, what's happening here? But when in fact, there could have been a dominant gene from the predecessors that the parents, depends how far it is, how's the strength of that gene, whether it has been passed on if it's dominant, and you may have two short parents with a very tall child. And the siblings are all like the parent, short, but you will see one is like, standing out over there, literally. So that's the role of heredity and the role of environment now. Now, for example, there is a misconception that diabetes is genetic, heart disease is genetic, whereas in fact it is actually the family environment, the learning from the family environment, from the parents, the learning of the lifestyle, same lifestyle, adopting the same dietary habits, adopting the same socio-emotional responses that makes the person, puts the person at higher risk for cardiovascular disease. So for example, so in this case, environment and heredity, which is playing the more important role in development, that question is still not answered, whether heredity is dominating or environment. Now, there is a field of epigenetics, okay, behavioral epigenetics, cognitive epigenetics. What this means is that actually, again, misconception. See, science is all about finding new facts. And the main doing MSc. So you must know this. The core feature of science is that whatever is found out can be false. It is not 100% the fact. It could be proven wrong. So that is one possibility that a scientist must always keep open. So earlier it was thought that the person's genetic makeup is fixed at birth. So the genes, the way they are, that is how the development of the person's qualities and features are going to be determined. But epigenetics is a new field which is showing that genes change in response to the environment. Okay, so your genetic makeup will change in response to what is happening around you. Now, around you in the environment, please note, does not only mean outside environment, but also internal environment. Genes are just one small bit in the entire internal environment, right? Capping the gene, you have the nucleus. Capping the nucleus, you have the cell. And finally, the other interstitial environment that will be there. We'll understand this in the second chapter, which Shruti ma'am will be taking. So when it comes to epigenetics, environment changes the genetic code of the genes themselves. What is expressed, what is not expressed is determined by the internal and external environment. So we can debate, perhaps there's a forum for this, which one is going to be more relevant, heredity or environment. The second issue, whether development is active or passive. What this means is the role that the individual is taking. Now see in this image, or the one on the left is running. He is taking charge of that race. Okay, let us think that that's the race of life. And this the individual in the green t-shirt is passive. He's like a little slow, little worried, not going as fast as the individual in the blue. So what this debate is surrounding around is that whether the person takes an active role in the development process, whether I have control over how good my cognitive abilities are, or whether I take a backseat in how good my cognitive abilities are, whether it is already predetermined for me and I cannot change it. So I'm not going to be able to change in the passive aspect. Whereas in the active aspect, it means that the individual is in charge of change in their life. So again, in certain areas, our role may be active, like gathering of knowledge, uh, development of our cognitive abilities that we can more or less have a control over. But the biological processes, besides diet, at times we may not be able to be active change makers in our biology. Sometimes if a person, for example, is born with a hole in the heart, they cannot change that, right? They cannot be active change makers of their heart condition. So if whereas in if for example if an individual is not willing to be interested in the classroom, then he is taking or she is taking a passive role for their in their knowledge acquirement or their cognitive development. Another debate is whether development is continuous or whether it is stage wise, right? So here you can see this image, right? You see that there are different stages here, but at the same time, it's a continuous process. When you talk about continuous, you talk about a gradual change that occurs within the lifespan. So is it that lifespan is just of a series of gradual, like, just one gradual change in a continuous fashion, or is it separated by distinct stages? Now, this question can perhaps not be answered because it depends on how we choose to look at development. So we can look at development as one continuous continuum, or we can look at it as distinct separate stages, one at a time. So both are equally accurate. Same with the previous debate. Certain places we can be active, certain we can be passive. Heredity plays an important role as well as environment. So same development can be classified as continuous or stage wise. What it is exactly that at the moment we cannot, the field has said that it's an issue because you know how it is in science or in disciplines. We want to know like the exact converging fact about things, whereas here it is a debate. Finally, the last issue in development of lives in the lifespan is the issue of stability versus change. How often are people going to have the same traits throughout life? Like, is the person, for example, if as a child, the individual is a shy individual, is the person going to remain shy for their whole life? Or if the person is very talkative, is that person going to remain talkative for the whole life? Is that trait going to be stable or is it going to change? Right? What is more common? Is stability a feature of development or change is a feature of development? Both will be in the principles. We have seen how it is going to be it is multi-dimensional as well as multi-directional. So this is exactly that debate, whether it's stable or changing. Sometimes stable, sometimes change. So this debate talks about how the trait of that individual, how stable it is, and whether it could be, how often it changes, and which are the traits that remain stable, which are the characteristics that remain stable, and which are the traits and characteristics that change over time. So that was the brief introduction into lifespan development. I'm leaving now the time open for questions. Please ask any questions with regards to the information on the slide, something that came up to your mind, or any other things that I spoke about. Any curiosities? Oops. Yes, Jayden? Please go ahead.
Ma'am, how long would it take for the genetic factors to change? I mean, it can't be completely changed, but certain aspects, how long does it take?
It is variable. Something like a chemical stimulus is relatively going to change it faster. Whereas if you have a prolonged stimulus, like a disturbed environment in terms of for example, abuse in the home or something, that process of genetic change is going to be gradual. Again, the field is relatively new. It's hard to determine exactly how fast the change is going to occur in the genetic process. But over time, yes, it could be a span of a few months when it comes to chemical stimuli like pollution, environment, being exposed to toxins. At cellular levels, we see that this change could be in a period of 3 to 4 months in cultures, cell cultures in laboratories. Whereas in humans, this is slightly a difficult area to study, right? How we are going to expose the individual to a difficult situation and see how it's going to change. It has some ethical risks involved. There are a few studies done, and the key word for you to go and do more research on this is epigenetics. So you can find out more. And of course, I too am going to find out a lot more since you have asked this question. And maybe in the next class, we can discuss it further.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Pleasure. Are there any other questions before we end the class? All right. So students, have a lovely evening. It was nice speaking with you all today. And yeah, see you all tomorrow.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Please write down
Thank
your
you, ma'am.
questions. Pleasure. Write down your questions for tomorrow. Since we are going to meet in the first hour, we can discuss them. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.